About a mile and a half from the town of Guelph, we got our first look at the hellhole that contained over 1,000 prisoners from all walks of life and of all ages. The first glance was deceiving because all the exterior ugliness was masked with ivy and lush green lawns. There were attractive flower beds, large stately maple trees, 2 beautiful miniature lakes, even apple orchards and red barns with cattle grazing in the open fields. As the Black Maria drove closer, some of the veneer peeled away, materializing through the ivy-covered administration building and sprawling cell blocks were thousands of steel bars, barbed wire fences, and the white watchtowers. These are the words of Roger Caron, the author of Go Boy, as he approached the penitentiary as a prisoner on October 16, 1954. On behalf of the Guelph Arts Council, welcome to our tour of the Ontario Reformatory for Doors Open 2021. In 1910, Provincial Secretary William Hanna decided to reform the prison system by creating a program of humane treatment and useful work within extensive grounds and sympathetic architecture. He wanted to use incarceration to reform men rather than to punish criminal behavior, in contrast to the brutality of the Toronto Central Prison. He chose the rural countryside outside Guelph as the site for this new type of prison, a place where inmates could have the opportunity to get back to the land and learn useful skills by working on the farm and in industrial shops. He purchased 7 farms and lots, totaling approximately 1,000 acres. The Guelph Junction Railway built a spur line to service the construction and bring coal to the site. He hired Toronto architect John Lyle to design the buildings and grounds. At first, 14 prisoners and 2 guards lived in one of the old farmhouses on the original property. Hanna camped on the land to personally supervise the plans and the work parties. The prisoners prepared the site, cleared the land, laid tracks to bring stone from the quarry, erected a temporary dormitory to house 200 inmates, and began the building. These are pictures of the quarry from which they mined the stone, and the construction by 300 prisoners. The main administration building, built in 1911 to 1915 in the Beaux-Arts style, had an imposing tower and entrance. Over its central door was a relief of scales of justice carved by George Farnworth. He had recently immigrated to Guelph from England. He later opened a gravestone sculpting business across from Woodlawn Cemetery, known now as Farnworth Memorials. The official opening was on September 25th, 1911, 110 years ago. Within a few years of the official opening, the Ontario Reformatory was a well-known tourist attraction, praised widely for its landscape and for its program. So, let's open those doors. Initially, the building housed the offices of the warden and his staff. The offices on each side of the administration building were paneled with oak and had a limestone fireplace. There was also a registration desk where the prisoners' belongings were taken and stored, as well as equipment and files. In 1975, during renovation of these offices, some old logbooks were discovered. One of them showed that one of the first inmates was an Irishman charged with public drunkenness and another German inmate convicted for embezzlement. The visitors' room allowed families to meet with inmates in a more casual, bright atmosphere. Although there was a guard on a raised platform at the end of the room, families could meet at tables and chairs. Along the wall was a large painting of animals in the Four Seasons, but it was painted over after the prison shut down. Through the window is the intake driveway and tunnel to convey prisoners to the lower level for entrance procedures. There were some community cells in the basement. This wing of the original reformatory contains the cells used when prisoners from the Ontario Hospital for the Criminally Insane, Feeble-Minded, and Epileptic were housed here from 1911 until 1933. In that year, the prisoners were transferred to the new hospital facility in Penetanguishene. You will notice the solid doors on these cells and the closed slot where food was delivered to the inmates to prevent them from throwing food at the guards. This section, that held mainly lifers in those years, was completely separated. Between this wing and the reform wing was the guard control center and tower. The original cell buildings had 3 floors with 13 cells on each floor. All the metal grills, doors, and tables were made by prisoners. As you can see from the picture, the hallways had steel multi-pane windows to allow the maximum amount of sunshine and fresh air to reach the cells. This was part of Hanna's reform plans, as he believed that the fresh air was important for the spirits of the prisoners. Cabinets in the hallways held sleeping blankets and towels to prevent prisoners from hanging themselves with their bedding. Between some of the cells were openings with an air vent and utilities shaft. They contained a ladder so that the guards could quickly run through the tunnels and appear wherever trouble was happening. Some graffiti on the cell walls kept track of time or commented on their surroundings. Some names were scratched into the stone walls as the prisoners built them. On each floor were these large dormitory rooms that would originally hold 22 to 25 prisoners. In Lyle's original design, they were made of stone and stucco. They were the prized accommodations because the windows looked out onto the fields. Later, they were used as classrooms or TV rooms. Notice the TV frame on the right-hand wall. The old photo shows the temporary dormitories built by the prisoners in 1912. Feeding up to 1,000 men at a time took great planning, large amounts of food, and huge machines and cooking implements. Under the floor in the original kitchen was piping that provided ventilation and took the steam, water, and smoke to vents outside. This unique system kept the kitchen clean of grease and odors. Near the kitchen was a large bakery that made all the bread for the reformatory and for hospitals in Whitby and Mimico. The prisoners ate in shifts and picked up their food from a window in the hallway and took it to the dining room. In 1914, the dining room seated up to 750 men on tables and benches bolted to the floor. In 1950, it was expanded to seat up to 1,000 men. At the back left corner was an observation slit for guards with a gas rifle and tear gas. In case of a riot, the doors would be locked. The shiny metal wall at the back was for the dishwasher. The cast iron pillars were spaced according to building requirements of the era. A more modern dishwasher to handle the large number of dishes. Some examples of the medical facilities. These are from the later years of the correctional center. In 1949, a new hospital wing was started, completed in 1955 with 53 beds, a nursing station, operating rooms, and isolation rooms for those with venereal diseases or tuberculosis. An elevator nearby went down to a morgue below. The photos on the right show the dental office, featuring a tooth inlaid on the floor and a blue graphic. The prisoner who added these elements because of the popular dental nurse was later charged with defacing government property. After the Burwash Industrial Farm Prison closed in 1975, a number of Native Canadians increased at the Guelph Correctional Center. They supported each other and formed their own support group called the Native Sons, and were assigned a room in the Assembly Hall buildings. The murals are still on the walls of that room. The exercise yard was accessed by the prisoner entrance at the far corner and overseen by guards in the central control tower. Tour groups were not allowed to go down through the tunnels because there was asbestos in the heating pipes. The tunnels constitute an internal loop system of approximately 1.5 kilometers between the main buildings. Their purpose is to contain the mechanical heating and water systems and to provide linkage and access to all main areas of the prison. There are many access points in the tunnels to different areas so that guards can quickly access any troubles or crisis. 19th century prisons always had underground tunnels, some with rail lines and push carts for food and laundry. There are also tool storage and workshops. The machine shop building, built in 1911, is the oldest permanent building constructed for the reformatory. Its stone exterior walls were constructed by the prisoners with stone from the nearby quarry. The large arched window openings allowed natural light, as electricity was expensive when it was built. In front of this building is the large chimney serving the whole complex. The mechanical building has been extensively altered over the years to meet changing needs, but its stone shell and layout are intact and impressive. Near the power plant were many other workshops: the woolen mill that made blankets and socks, the tailor shop, creamery, broom shop, planing mill, cannery, and abattoir. In 1915, the large greenhouse was built, but it is now collapsed. Until 1948, all Ontario vehicle license plates were made in the motor marker factory. The photo in the upper right corner shows the laundry and bathhouse in 1912. Some views of building interiors and some of the products manufactured in them. According to Carl Grotenthaler's book, The House on the Hill, quote, "The wooden picnic tables were a very successful product. At one time, the bush gang would go out to private and public cedar lots and thin out the bush, taking suitable logs for picnic table production and paying the owners. The logs were planed and treated to produce the picnic tables that were used in all provincial parks and most municipal parks. Over a 10-year period, more than 40,000 picnic tables were produced." As we leave the interior of the main reformatory buildings, we emerge into the beautiful landscape. It was also constructed by the prisoners with stone from the quarries. These are the words of one of the administrators reporting on the public being allowed to access these beautiful grounds. From a 1931 report of the reformatory, great and perhaps spectacular are the reformatory industries. The preeminent industry, after all, is salvaging humanity and returning inmates to civilian life, better fitted and firmly resolved to become good and useful citizens. Industries provide useful work and training, which is part of the first essential of all reformative effort, and incidentally effect considerable saving of public funds, but they are only a means to an end. I hope you have enjoyed our tour of the amazing and beautiful Ontario Reformatory. You are welcome to walk around the grounds in the daylight hours and enjoy the work done by prisoners 110 years ago. Thank you for joining me on this virtual tour. And some notes about this tour. Except for the historical pictures, the photos are mine, taken for Doors Open 2009 tours and on a 2012 tour with Heritage Guelph. Over the years from 1911 to 2002, the buildings were renovated, altered in purpose and design, or restored. The photos show them as they were after the Guelph Correctional Centre closed. The research and tour notes are mine. I have tried as much as possible to be accurate in my statements. I would welcome any corrections or comments. If you have stories or photos about the reformatory or the correctional center, I'd love to hear them and add them to our knowledge of this fascinating part of Guelph's heritage. The Yorklands Green Hub is also collecting the stories. My contact information is on the screen, and on behalf of the Guelph Arts Council, thanks for watching. I'm Susan Ratcliffe.